Hello, everybody. Welcome to Monday Night Live. Tonight, I'm delighted to have my friend and colleague and former board member of the Professional Speaking Association, Jane Gunn, with us. I'm going to read you some of Jane Gunn's CV because it's so impressive. I would probably make a mistake if I tried to read it myself, just letting somebody else in. So Jane is an expert in the field of conflict resolution, a trained mediator, facilitator, known to her clients as the Barefoot Mediator. What a great name. Listed as a global leader in Who's Who's mediation and featured in the Legal 500 Hall of Fame. President of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators and is a former director and board member of the Civil Mediation Council of England and Wales. Jane says that with the world increasingly focused on the global unrest created by the pandemic, racial inequality, terrorism, climate change, financial instability, and more, perhaps I ought to say geopolitical issues, you need to add that on, Jane. Jane, welcome, and thanks for joining us again. I've always been fascinated by the world of mediation, which is very close to my specialism of negotiating. What's going on in the world of mediation? I know you were speaking at the Kenya mediation conference on Saturday.
Friday it was, yes, Friday. So I had a breakfast time slot, talk about time changes. I think it started at 6 a.m. for me, and I had to be, so I said I'll be there in my PJs, but I did manage to put a jacket on the top. It was absolutely lovely because it was their first mediation conference. And the interesting thing is they said, mediation is 6,000 years old, really, except we're just rediscovering how we can apply mediation in business and particularly in the legal world. And they're very, very passionate about it in Africa and particularly in Kenya. So it was a delight to be there. And my message, I suppose, and why I've become the Barefoot Mediator is that in these times where we are dealing with all these things that you mentioned, Derek, it's about the essence and the principles of mediation. What can we go back to? And that's really what they were saying in Kenya. We've had this thing called mediation. We've been practicing it for 6,000 years, but we've forgotten it in the rush for to apply legal processes and commercial processes. We've forgotten that we've got these ancient principles, which are all about communication and collaboration and understanding human beings. And why don't we go back to those? And that's been my sense that's been the reason behind this term, the Barefoot Mediator. Let's go back to the absolute essence of what are we walking with in these times, and how can we use those skills to help us negotiate some things which are not commercial disputes, they're not legal disputes, they're just problems that we need to solve, they're things we need to talk about. So what are the big conversations that we need to talk about that we're not talking about because we're afraid, or because we're afraid of being cancelled? This is the other thing. Many people are not able to speak up or willing to speak up about some of these issues because there is this fear of, will I cross a boundary? Will I say something I'm not supposed to say? Will I be cancelled? And that's a real fear for many professional people. And so we're not therefore talking about how can we have a proper debate about some of these things? How can we think, how as a community can we work with some of these issues? That's really my thinking at the moment.
Sure. Going back to Kenya, when we had our rehearsal, you told me one or two funny things, Jane. So
let me see what the notes were. So they said
PhD. What does that stand for?
PhD. So PhD, they said, stands for permanent head damage.
Love it. Love it. And what did they say about you can't mediate if you're hungry?
So one of the questions they said we always ask in Kenya is, have you been fed? Because hunger cannot be spoken to. I love that. Hunger cannot be spoken to. And it's so true, isn't it? If you're hungry, if you're not comfortable, if you're hungry for anything, if you're hungry for warmth or water or food, you've got to get people comfortable. You've got to build that rapport. That's, you've just got to get people comfortable. Think about their comfort. I always say when I'm people ask me how to run a better meeting. I said, think about it as a dinner party. Think about you're running your mediation as a dinner party. So the first thing you would do is you would say, hi, welcome. What would you like to drink? Can I take your coat? You know, you would host people, you would look after them. And why do we not do that in a mediation? So, you know, are you comfortable? Have you got enough food? Would you like a bar of chocolate? As always my question.
And
so
you take sweets sometimes with you, don't you, as well?
I do take chocolate. And one of the most successful mediations I did was a board mediation. And for some reason, we had a big slab of chocolate, you know, but one of these very big slabs in the cupboard. And I thought, oh, I'll take that to the mediation. And I put it in the center of the table. Now, of course, the thing about a big slab of chocolate is you can't just take a mini Mars bar. You've got to break it. And when you've broken it, you've then got to offer it to everybody else, haven't you? You don't just break it and then take a piece. So the breaking and sharing of the chocolate was like breaking bread. And I have to tell you, I hadn't planned it, but it transformed the meeting because it sat there for a long time and then somebody couldn't resist it any longer. So they reached out for the chocolate and broke it, but because they had to break it into enough pieces and then offer it round. And that's just symbolic of, okay, we're all going to share this now. And that kind of means, well, we're all in this together now.
Jane, can I just pick that up and just comment on it? Because it's some of the rules of basic psychology, isn't it? Basically, the power of influence. Number one, it's an icebreaker. Number two, it builds rapport. Number three, it's reciprocity. You're giving something to the three parties. And number four, you're sharing it, which is what you're trying to achieve. So these simple things, you know, keep it simple, stupid, are so obvious. So thanks for sharing that. And that's great. Now, we also talked on Friday about some people only being interested in disputes, not really solving the dispute. They just want a good old, in my language, good old punch up. And perhaps they're psychopaths or sociopaths or whatever the word is. You know, they just want to be, the world is for me. Or as we say in win-win, they just want to win.
Well, this came out of Kenya as well. And there are certain countries around the world where they've got such a backlog in the court system that you almost pass your right to litigation on in your will because you're never going to get to court in your lifetime. And it's true in some countries that, you know, that is how it works. But they therefore value the dispute. The dispute is valued as something, I've got this dispute going. And they don't really want to settle it. And of course, I think we see that in historic geopolitical disputes, if you like, you know, between countries, because one of the places I've been and visited and worked with is it's a charity called Seeds of Peace, which operates out of Washington. But they bring students who are identified as having leadership skills from Israel and Palestine and bring them together in a US holiday camp. And they're so awkward with each other at first because they say our parents have taught us that we don't speak to them, that they're a threat to us, that we're to fear them. And then they get together and they say, but we're just teenagers, you know. And they do all sorts of exercises there, you know, a bit like breaking and sharing chocolate, but they'll play basketball and they have a dialogue session and they do all sorts of things together. And then the next thing they do, and I went with them and I took my children, they go then into Washington and they meet with the current Secretary of State. So it was Colin Powell the year we went. And we met with Colin Powell. And so they go through that whole experience together. And then they go back into their communities as seeds to plant their, you know, the better understanding of these people are just human beings, and but we carry this history and this valuing the dispute, whatever it is, into the next generation. And of course that happens in families as well. You know, family disputes and family feuds continue for years until people can't remember what was the initiating thing, you know, can't remember what it was. We just don't talk to Uncle John. We just know that we don't talk to Uncle John. Why is that? Can't remember.
Isn't that ridiculous? I mean, you got me thinking there because as you know, I was involved in the mediation one that you helped me with and coached me on, but that was being carried in a couple of the balance sheets. And
Yes.
then you're reminding me it's being carried forward in Kenya into sort of as an asset. Is that right? Almost
Yeah,
as
almost an asset.
The dispute. Wow. And
of course, you have this thing called vexatious litigants.
what does that mean? Come on.
A vexatious litigant is somebody just likes being angry and litigating against people. So, that's a term that's well known in the legal world, vexatious litigant, somebody just loves being angry and then say, right, I'm going to sue you. So that's it.
How do you resolve that when you've got somebody like that, or somebody that you clearly don't want to? A client of mine said to me the other day, I think the other side are nutcases, and they're not gonna they're not gonna deal with this. How do you deal with that?
It's very, very difficult. I mean, if somebody really doesn't want to enter into a negotiation, a mediation, or to collaborate, you can't change their mind. They've got to want to do it. And so the only way you can is literally by going through the process and seeing if they find a reason. Is there a reason that they find? And often that reason is nothing to do with the dispute. It's often to do with when they begin to think about, oh, well, I'm going to have to spend the next 2 years of my life really in my lawyer's office instead of on the golf course, or instead of with my wife, or instead of with my grandchildren, or whatever that is. Is that what I really want to do? So you have to go through a risk cost analysis and say, what's the risk? What's the benefit of this? And what else could I be doing with my time, frankly? So, it's 2.5 years, isn't it? Derek, how long your client spent, you've just seen someone go through that, and it's every waking hour. And so one of the things you say is, what would it feel like if you woke up tomorrow and didn't have to think about this anymore? Now, some people don't want to do that. Sometimes their purpose has become this case. And so it's for them, they don't know who they would be without it. Perhaps they don't have anything else in their life, and pursuing this vendetta has become their purpose. And you often get that in neighborhood disputes, for example. Very, very difficult to manage those, because you're talking to human beings on a different level. It isn't about who's right or wrong. It isn't about the legal rights and wrongs of the case. It's about someone's sense of purpose, and how do they find another purpose that supplements that one or supplants that one. It's very, very, very challenging.
They need a life coach, or they need a few mates.
Well, they need a life, Derek, basically.
No, they need a few pals, don't they?
They do. And I think,
yeah.
And then it's about having compassion for someone to say, well, that is the problem, and that's a sad problem to have, isn't it, really? That often for people, what they're operating from is a place of fear. And that's true for many of us, right now with all the things that are going on. It stimulates a sense of fear in us, and people have a fear of not being good enough, not having a purpose. All of those things matter to us all, and they're often at the root of why we pursue other people, because we want to feel, in some sense, we feel less than good about ourselves, less than someone else. Yes, Kate's just putting it there. The fear of being insignificant is huge.
I was just thinking about that as well. You're right about not having anything else to do. They've been made redundant, or they've sold their business and they don't know what to do with themselves, and they need a bit of help, don't they? Not from a psychologist. They need a bit of help from their pals, or from people like us, to be honest, to give them a steer or two. I can see that.
So often then I'm not mediating a legal case, I'm mediating grief, fear of insignificance. You're mediating So sometimes the problem is not what the parties say it is, it's something else. It's those things.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I can see that. I can see that. We were talking about people in power or even in government not practicing what they preach. That was a bit of a hobby horse of yours, I detected, Jane.
Well, I suppose my experience of being on different boards, of observing, as we all have been recently quite closely, our members of parliament, and changing of leadership. Do they practice what they preach, and do they actually practice these? That's why I've gone back to the essence and principles of mediation. Do we see those in practice? And there's simple skills like, are we listening to people? Are we really listening to people? Are we listening to the electorate, for example? Are we really listening to people? I mean, it's shocking, isn't it, really, that we watch the behavior that we watch in terms of how the leaders of our country have been in and out of office in the last few months. I think it's shocking the way the things they say about each other, the way they behave towards each other. And of course, that's modeling, isn't it? That models to other people. Oh, is that what leadership is? Perhaps that's how I should be operating as a leader in my business. And of course, young people are watching that too and thinking, oh, that's leadership. Well, it's not. That's not leadership, is it really?
No, it's not.
It's a very poor example of it. And I honestly feel quite ashamed that we should think that that is what leadership looks like.
And of course, it's flying around on social media as well. We mustn't forget that, which is a totally new phenomenon, isn't it? When we think about it, perhaps over the last 10 or 15 years, and people can say anything on social media and make it look like they've got the authority to do it. I put a LinkedIn post up last week about Elon Musk. I couldn't believe, he's bought Twitter, and if he opens it up and then lets Trump and people like that say whatever they like, which influences people, that's it's not right. It's not right. And why on earth has he paid 44 billion for Twitter, which has only just made a profit? That's another issue we could go into for another day, couldn't we? But Jane, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because it hit a hot spot with me. You were saying that we have quite a social responsibility now to help people who are in trouble with electricity bills going up by 400%. There's a number of pubs that we can all think about, which will just close, won't they? If they don't.
It's my passion, and I'm not a pub goer, but I read an article recently about, I think it was one of the oldest pubs in the country that had survived, I can't tell you how many wars, pandemics, and then it said, but we're going to have to close. And then I went to book another pub recently for a lunch this week and looked on the website and it said, we're closed. So I rang the owner because I knew the owner, and I said, what's happened? And he said, my electricity bill has gone up, or my energy bill had gone up from 2,000 to 4,000 just in the summer. And he said, now, outdoor seating, everything's, but he said, my energy bill for October would be £7,000. Plus, with Brexit, can't get the staff. I mean, all the local places are struggling for staff. He said, I just have to close. So I was giving a keynote speech at the Chartered Institute's mediation symposium. And I thought again, how would we use the skills and the process of mediation to look at this problem? So I set it up as a problem. Here's a pub or restaurant in a village. It's got two owners, and the two owners between them can't agree, but they think they're not going to survive till Christmas. So what would the alternative be? The alternative would be to have a conversation about it. And who could you involve in that conversation if you opened it up to more than just the two owners? Well, you could invite the staff to contribute their thoughts. You could invite the customers. You could invite the landlord. You could invite the community. And everybody could then say, what could we all do? What ideas do we have that would keep this pub open to Christmas or beyond Christmas or for the next 6 months? Could it, for example, become a community hub? Could the book club meet there? Could some of the people who are working from home go there once a week? Could you have a business club that could start up there as a sort of mastermind group, Derek, for local hybrid workers? are there lots of ideas that could keep this place going? But you need to have that conversation. And I think the mediation process and a stakeholder dialogue could help that happen. So that was one thing. I went to visit a cricket club in just outside Cardiff, and they had already done this, and they were opening up the cricket club facilities for wakes, toddler groups. They were doing exactly that, and they'd managed to keep their cricket club going. And then on Monday last week, I went to visit near here a small farm. There's a friend of mine called Emma. She's a young girl, but she runs her own sheep and cattle farm called Emma's Useful Acres.
Love it. Love it.
She was struggling, and I said, you know, what do you need, Emma? How could the community support you? Because so two of those people I'm going to interview on my podcast, so they get some publicity, but also so that we get this idea that having a conversation around this in the community could help these people to come up with some different ideas. So Emma and Gareth from the Cricket Club are going to be on my podcast to discuss this, and I'm going to go meet the other pub owners. I think I'm the pub saviour.
Jane, for somebody who doesn't drink
I don't even drink.
Doesn't have caffeine. I've always tried to buy you a drink and failed miserably. You are a bit different, aren't you?
So, yeah. Anyway, I do feel passionate about community as well, and that we should support our local communities, because when they're gone, they're gone. Yeah. And I have always shopped locally, gone to the farmers market, bought my Christmas shopping in the local village rather than going to the town. And I just think more than ever we need to do that. I think my husband came home with some statistics to say if we did that, we would add, I can't remember how much, to the local economy. It's massive. But we don't think to do that, to shop locally, to support our local communities. And now's the time to do that. So not sure. I think I've got a bit of a campaign going here. I need to start a campaign, I think, to...
Well, you've got 15 supporters on here straight away, so you sold it brilliantly. And I was just thinking about where Godfrey lives, where Nancy lives. There's all these old-fashioned pubs, too many of them, and half of them are going to go pretty quickly. But the other worst thing is my pal who had a pub, of course, had a personal guarantee to Green King, the landlords, and it took him years to pay that off. Because
it's scary times, Derek.
The amount of the lease in this property company was ridiculous.
Yeah, it's scary times for sure for these pub owners. So they do need help. And you know, I know times have changed a bit and people stay in and watch Netflix, but we will miss our communities if we let them fade away. And
of course, Amazon's got a lot to answer for this, hasn't it?
It's easy, isn't it? You know, all of this is easy. It's easy to sit at home and have Amazon. And of course, there are some things that are convenient to have delivered to your door, but there are other times when actually going somewhere and meeting someone. I mean, on principle, I won't go to an automatic cash point, an automatic checkout. I will go to a human being at the supermarket, because otherwise there won't be any human beings at the supermarket. And we're actually contributing to people losing their jobs by doing that, because they'll just say, well, look, everybody loves the automated tills. It's like keeping on using cash. If we don't use cash, there won't be any cash. So, you know, on principle, we have to keep supporting the human interaction. And otherwise these things will just fade and die, and then we'll wonder where they went to.
I think before we close it and then have an open discussion, Jane, tell us about the most awkward mediation you've been in the last, since you were last on, in the last 6 to 9 months.
Since we were last on, gosh, I'm trying to think now. Who have I had? Well, I've done well, I suppose I've got one at the moment, which is jolly difficult. And it's just that it's two business partners who, it's very difficult to actually get them engaged in the process, because they are they are so locked in their own bubble, I suppose. That's the challenge, is when people are in their own bubble, they can't see beyond it. It is like, we were talking a bit about that, and I know you've been posting about that, Derek, about being thinking outside the box. But some people are actually in the box. They're not even thinking, they're actually in the box.
I think with some people, they never actually got in the box in the first place, did they?
It's like my granddaughter likes to get in a box, you know, a toy, something comes for her and she'd rather play with the box. So it's like being in the box, but you've got to literally step out of the box. I've written, my blog today was about a word I woke up with this word going around in my head, perspicacity, which is about, can you see clearly? Can you see clearly? Many people are, it's as though they're in a muddy swamp. I'll post the link in the chat box. It's as though they're in a muddy swamp. They can't see the issue clearly. They can't see, yes, Kate's saying, it can seem like a safe space, can't it, really, being in a box.
It's I find in business, and I found this working in Barclays in various jobs, that many people can't see clearly. They can't see the wood for the trees, and that's where people can help them. I can see that that's what you do. I am surprised at the number of people that cannot see the real issues, the big picture.
Yeah, they
what
can't.
they're going to say on their tombstone, how this will matter in a year's time.
That's right, those questions. So that's today's blog. I do blog 4 days a week on LinkedIn, if anybody's interested to read.
Oh, Jane, I'm in awe of your LinkedIn posts. If anyone's not connected to Jane, you need to be connected to Jane on LinkedIn. Her posts they're very professional. I make mine up as I go along, Jane, but yours are just the business.
Well, this morning's was hilarious, actually, because I usually write them the night before and set them up and post them. But for some reason, I had this weird phenomenon yesterday. I was typing my blog, and then all of a sudden, underneath my cursor, all this text started coming out. And it was as though my laptop had been taken over, and I thought it was infected. And so I rang my security guy this morning. We couldn't work it out. What had happened is VoiceOver had connected, and all the noise and conversation that was going on around was being interpreted in some mad way and represented itself in my document. So a load of nonsense was appearing. And I thought my laptop was infected, and it wasn't, but very, very funny.
What I can't work out on LinkedIn is why people just advertise their own businesses. Why don't give a bit of value? Because people know who you are when you give value. I just don't get that. And because Instagram does that all the time, and I've given up on Facebook and Twitter. But yeah, it's interesting. If you get, what's it, the law of sowing and reaping? Put stuff out there and you get stuff back. It works absolutely 100%.
It does, doesn't it? And the number of people I meet, even from overseas, who I never ticked, they never like it, they never comment, and they say, I read your blog every day. I would never have known. It's fascinating.
Well, Mike Clare, who's coming on Friday and sponsoring the event that Graham Jones and I are running, I hadn't heard from him for 10 years, but he's still got my newsletter, and he phoned me and said, can I bring 12 people to the event?
Brilliant, Derek. That's brilliant. I did the same thing to me.
About sustainability of marketing and putting things out there. Jane, before we close, and I know you'll come back and join us at Christmas or whatever, one last tip.
What would my tip be? I would just say, walk your talk, live by your principles. I think we can do no better than that, really. It's about being grounded, isn't it? And then just knowing who you are and having it's not about confidence. I like the word courage at the moment. I think we can all have confidence, but courage, have the courage to live by your own principles. That's it.
I like the word authentic as well, which is what you're really saying, being authentic and being true to yourself and walking your talk. That's absolutely brilliant. Jane Gunn, thanks for joining us. How do people get in touch with you? Get your newsletter, get your podcast, get your LinkedIn blogs, and goodness knows what.
Jane at janegunn.co.uk. Just email me. You've got my LinkedIn blog there. Let's say link with me on LinkedIn. That would be lovely. And otherwise, email me if you'd like to join my I've recently got my newsletter up and going again, so that's a good way.
Put me on it, Jane. I want newsletters.
I will do, Derek. I will do. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Yay.
Jane Gunn, thanks for joining us. See you shortly. And will you stay on for the more difficult questions that we can't have on YouTube or the podcast? Thanks very much.